Way to leave us on a cliffhanger, Game of Thrones. Charlie in Westeros here, and before some of you ask me yet again, no, I am not related to Ramsay or the Boltons in any way. I think. Anyway, let's get into my review for episode 2 of season 6 for Game of Thrones, entitled Home. So, right off the bat, this was one insanely intense episode. Considering what happened these first 2 episodes, I think the theme of this season is family members killing off family members. And I do wonder if it'll happen again this season. Just saying. So, before I start to over-speculate on that and make some crazy predictions, let's first talk about Bran's story. Considering this episode was entitled Home, I think it's an appropriate one since Bran Stark gets a vision of Winterfell's past. All in all, it was a pretty awesome scene, and I was so happy we finally get a glimpse of Lyanna Stark. By the way, does anyone think it was a coincidence she shows up the same episode Jon Snow is revived? In all seriousness though, what surprised me the most was seeing a young Hodor actually being able to speak. I had always assumed Hodor was born without the ability to communicate fully, but this makes me wonder what happened to make Hodor, or Willis, lose his speech. Maybe he was in a serious accident, maybe he knows much more than we think he does about events in Game of Thrones. All I'm saying is that if he ever manages to speak again, I'd be very curious to hear what he has to say. Speaking of Winterfell, let's talk about its present, and I gotta say that was probably the most traumatizing moment of the season for me so far. Yes, more so than seeing Melisandre's true form last episode. I mean, the way Ramsay kills his own stepmother and half-brother made me shudder. That wasn't the most noteworthy part of the scene, however. Not only was Roos's murder somewhat of a surprise, but the fact that Roose announced that the Manderleys, the Karstarks, and the Umbers were aligned to the Boltons was insane. Now, I don't want to delve into book territory too much, but I do wonder if the Manderleys and the Karstarks' apparent allegiance isn't falling into the same territory as the books, where the loyalty of these houses are either feigned or internally divided respectfully. The fact that the current Lord Karstark didn't bat an eyelash when Ramsay killed his father was also quite shocking, but what makes me even more concerned is that the Umbers declared in favor of the Boltons, and for those of you who might remember, Osha the Wildling said she was bringing the young Rickon Stark to the Umbers a few seasons ago, and that does make me very worried for the boy. Speaking of young lords, let's move on to King's Landing. I don't have too much to say here, but it did feel very strange to witness Cersei and her son Tommen having a weirdly enjoyable, tender moment, considering I've never cared much for her as a character. Also, seeing the Sparrows face off with Jaime this episode and the Mountain delivering his first kill, well, I think it's a clear indication as to where things will be going very soon in King's Landing, and I can only imagine we're going to have some kind of face-off between the Lannisters and possibly the Tyrell forces against the Sparrows very soon. In terms of face-offs, things are still surprisingly calm in Meereen. Now, I realize the events of this episode have probably helped fuel theories that Tyrion is in fact the son of the Mad King Aerys Targaryen and Joanna Lannister, but I am still hesitant to agree with that notion. Tyrion made an overt statement this episode that dragons are intelligent creatures who know when someone is a friend or a foe, and this was likely done to explain why Tyrion was able to get close to them this episode. If anything, however, I do think this scene just might demonstrate that you don't necessarily have to have Targaryen blood in you in order to fly a dragon. And wouldn't it just be cool to see Tyrion ride one in the end? Not saying it's going to happen, but it would still be nice to see it happen, in my opinion. Alright, going back north to Sansa and company, I think the main thing that stuck out to me this scene was the fact that Theon announces that he plans to go back to the Iron Islands. This is one prediction I definitely got wrong, since I'd always thought this would be a catalyst for Theon when he realizes that the Starks were the family he had longed for all along, not suddenly deciding to head back to Pike to be at home with a family he really doesn't know all that well. As far as the Iron Island scenes this episode are concerned, I think they stood as a nice contrast to the final scenes at Castle Black. Note that the Ironborn saying, "What is dead may never die, but rises again harder and stronger," was emphasized on multiple occasions, and right before the following scene when Jon Snow literally rises from the dead, hopefully harder and stronger. Another amusing part of the Iron Island plot was that Balon Greyjoy sort of mentions the fact that he is the only surviving king from the War of the Five Kings. Up to that point anyway. It's also interesting that Melisandre, who seemingly set Balon's death in stone a few seasons ago, is doubting her own beliefs in the very episode when Balon is finally killed off, and her prophecy is realized fully. While I feel for Yara Greyjoy at the loss of her father, I am glad to see he at least went out with just a little bit of a fight against his brother Euron. who gave me mad chills when he made his appearance. I'm sure the Greyjoy fans out there were super pleased about this character showing up. Alright, last location for this episode was Castle Black. Now, the fact that the wildlings show up at the right time to save the day made me so happy, especially seeing Woon Woon come on scene like a boss. I was very surprised Alistair Thorne and Ollie are still alive though, but I guess we'll find out if they'll be executed by the revived Jon Snow next episode or not. Honestly, I don't have too much to say about the scenes there, except that I was so hyped to see Jon Snow come back to life. And come on, I think we were all expecting that to happen at some point. All in all, it certainly was a nice end to a fantastic episode. Anyway, that's all for this review of episode 1. If you want to hear much more in-depth discussions and predictions for Game of Thrones, be sure to check out my small council group discussions with other fantastic YouTubers every Wednesday at 7 p.m. EST on James of Thrones channel, linked below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Oh, also the Melisandre video I promised last week is coming. It should be up in the next couple of days or so. But until then, take care, folks.
In the name of our king.
Guess who's back? Back again. Jon Snow's back. Tell a friend.